All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first Tuckahoe Talk for 2025. Actually, I guess it's the second one. We had one earlier at 1 o'clock, but you didn't miss anything for the year. So I want to first thank our library staff, if there are anyone here. Thank you very much for having us. This is an award-winning library. All of our libraries in Henrico County are top-notch, and so thank you for having us here today. And I'd also like to recognize some of the staff that are here from Henrico County, and not only the ones that are here today, but the ones that are watching online, the ones that are out there doing all the work. I'll tell you, whether they're filling potholes or picking up leaves or garbage or keeping your water on, I've learned very quickly over the past year that truly our number one asset is our people. And so thank you all for being here tonight, and everyone that's watching online. We have a pretty full agenda today. The recent events from last week kind of threw a little loop in me. So we're going to, the water story kind of took a little bit of a leadership role. So we're going to bump that up a little bit and talk about that. So we do have a pretty full agenda tonight. But before we get to the 2025 highlights, I want to highlight a few things from the first year on the board. We started back in 2024, maybe. Next picture. We started back in 2024 with the purchase of Verina Farms. It was a freezing day when we went out there and we signed the paperwork, but it's 2,000 acres on the James River. And literally, this is, folks, where Henrico County started. 1611, this was the first county seat for Henrico County. So we have an absolute gorgeous piece of property that we purchased, and we're looking forward to telling the story about how Henrico was started on this property in the year to come. We also celebrated the Taylor Farm Park opening, and if you haven't been over to Taylor Farm Park, I encourage you to do that when it's a little bit warmer in the spring and the summer. This is a park with amenities like we've never seen before in Henrico County. Splash pad, zip line, walking trails. There's a skateboarding, I don't know what you can call it, skateboarding all-wheel park. Thank you, Mr. Zanino. All-wheel park out there at Taylor Farm Park. And I do say it's one of the greatest parks in Henrico and probably the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I do try to get out there. We also opened last year the new Henrico Sports and Events Center. This hosted the women's A10 basketball tournament, the national wheelchair tournament was here, basketball tournament, and we're doing all of Henrico public school graduations at the Henrico Sports and Events Center. So you don't have to go down to the Siegel Center anymore. Again, try to get out there for a visit if you can. We also purchased 270 plus acres to potentially run a world-class golf course for the crossings. We're trying to keep that tournament, the senior PGA tournament that's currently at CCV. We're trying to keep that here in Henrico County. The final two large items, we established a more affordable housing trust fund to help buy down home costs across the county for working class first-time homeowners. We've met with the U.S. Senator, and they're actually trying to duplicate our project, our program from Henrico County, both at the state and the national level. So we're really excited about that. And on the affordable housing trust that we set up, we actually closed this week for the first time a home in Tuckahoe for someone. So we're helping to bring the cost down. If you've looked anywhere, a new home inside of the Tuckahoe area is probably $460, $470. It's really out of reach for a lot of people. And so we're trying to do something about that and bring that cost down for folks. Lastly, we opened this year our reservoir over in Cumberland County, and it's named the Virgil Hazlett Reservoir at Cobbs Creek. And it honors our former county manager. He had the vision and the foresight to create this. He didn't actually create it, but he had the vision and the foresight for the Cobbs Creek reservoir. This is a 12 billion gallon reservoir. To kind of put that in perspective, we utilize, and Mr. Yobb's going to correct me here, but we utilize somewhere in the 25 to 40 million gallons, and this is 12 billions that would be stored at the Cobbs Creek Reservoir. Yeah. Right on. That's good. He's the engineer, so I'm just a layperson, so he's a lot smarter than me about this. But I want to show a quick video of the Cobbs Creek. It's only about a minute and a half long, but it's a really a fantastic project that will really ensure that we have water. So when the James River is low, we can release water from Cobbs Creek Reservoir in Cumberland County. It will flow down the James River. We then can pump the water into our pumping station, clean it, which comes to your faucet. Does that make sense? It's only a minute. I just find that super impressive for Henrico County to own a reservoir in Cumberland County with that much water in it. And again, you're seeing pictures when it's not full. If you actually hold right, well, anyways, all those trees, there you go in the picture. We actually walked out on the dam, but all of that will be all underwater. That's the pump house. And again, I share this because when you hear reservoir, especially what happened in recent times of last week, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But that reservoir, we're not pumping water directly from that reservoir into our system. It's going to be released. It can be released into the James River, coming down the James River. Then we can pull the water in to our pumping station, to our water treatment facility. Okay, a couple other things I want to talk about in Tuckahoe from last year. We had the expansion for the pool over at Nova, the Nova pool at Regency Mall. And if you look at this, the top of this is going to be expanded for visitors and for guests up on the mezzanine level, and with the anticipation that we'll be able to attract some major regional and even some national swimming tournaments. Again, how does that help us? Revenue, obviously, from out-of-town guests. Staying on our hotels and eating in our restaurants is really great. They come here, they eat, they sleep, and then they go home. So they don't cause us, issues on our roads and our schools, etc. Helps our taxes and helps our schools with the meals tax. We also recently approved funding to the rebuild of Quioccasin Middle School. And I think our school board chair, Marcy Shea, is going to talk a little bit about that later this evening with you guys. But Quioccasin Middle School is going to be rebuilt. Tuckahoe Middle School, we have plans to build an auditorium. So for band, for drama, etc. At Tuckahoe Middle School, there'll be a new auditorium, about a 500-seat auditorium there. So she'll talk about that a little bit later today. And the next slide, there's something called Word on the Street. And I hope if you sign up back here, we'll make sure and get you the link and the information on how to sign up for this. But this is a really great resource for everyone. You can sign up by district. So if you live in Tuckahoe and you only care about roads or projects from Public Works inside of your district, then you can sign up for the Tuckahoe Word on the Street. You can sign up for the Brooklyn Word on the Street. You can sign up for all of them if you want. But it's a really good way to keep up to date because everybody's always asking me, what are you doing with this project? What are you doing with this project? When is this sidewalk going to be done? Word on the Street is the place to go. So if you Google it, or if you put your name on there, we'll make sure and get you the link. And I think maybe even online, they'll put it in the chat for you for Word on the Street. So that's a really great resource. We had several new businesses open in Tuckahoe, including a Kids Academy daycare right on Parham Road right here. We have a new seafood market restaurant called Shoreline that's open. We have coffee shops and more. We're certainly looking forward to any expansion over at the Regency Mall with new stores. We approved, with the help of our planning staff and our planning commissioner, who is right here, Brian Winterhoff, for the Tuckahoe District. We approved the redevelopment for the Reynolds Crossing property. Reynolds Crossing is where the Westin Hotel is, Plaza Azteca, between I-64 and Forest there. So I think it's about 54 acres, 55 acres. Probably be about a 10-year project, but really mixed use. And the point there is that I'm super excited what the planning staff has done, what our planning commissioner has done on smart growth, smart development, smart growth, outdoor living space, outdoor space that people can walk to, amenities, etc. at the Reynolds Crossing. So that's coming down the line. You'll see some action on that. Hopefully within this year, you'll see some action over there. And finally, not to steal our thunder from Parks and Rec, who's going to speak a little bit later today. They are working on some improvements to both Tuckahoe Park, which is really what most people think of as Tuckahoe Little League, and as well as Tuckahoe Creek Park. So we'll talk a little bit about that later too. So that's what we have going on at a very high level, what we did last year, what we have going on 2025. It was my first year on the board last year. I was drinking from a fire hose, and especially this week, even drinking more. I learned a lot more about water than I thought I would as an IT person coming around. So with that, we're going to insert in our agenda a little fireside chat with Mr. Steve Yob. And I want to introduce Steve as the guy who honestly helped and really was instrumental in assisting the fixes down at the Richmond water plant over last week. So Steve, I just want to thank you. I think the residents of Henrico and Richmond all owe you a great deal of gratitude, because Steve was down at the plant in Richmond. He had some consultants and other engineers with him, but I really do believe that this guy was the reason why the plant came back online. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And a round of applause. Thank you, Steve.
Test.
So Steve, let's have a seat. We're going to have a little
Absolutely.
where are my notes, Steve? There we go. So we're going to talk a little bit about what kind of happened. Let me make sure the camera, we're good camera guys. We're going to talk a little bit with what happened sort of last week. And we don't really want to talk about what happened down in Richmond, because Richmond is going to go through their own sort of post-op assessment, et cetera. And even in Henrico County, we're going to keep it at about the 30,000 foot level, because we're also doing a separate study. And we've hired, what, 2 companies, right, Steve?
That's correct.
And when is that report going to come to us?
February 11th.
February 11th.
Deadline.
Okay. So we're going to do a little post-op from Henrico County, kind of see what we did, what we can do. So let me try to, Steve, again, he's the smart engineer. I'm the lay person. So I'm going to just ask you a few questions, try to keep it. So for the past 125 years or so, Henrico County got its water from
the city.
From the city, only the city, right?
That's right.
So, and in the city, and then in the 90s, we decided to build a plant in the West End.
That's correct.
And in the West End, we have a water plant that produces how many MGD, which is?
1 million gallons per day.
Okay, 1 million gallons per day. So how many does that plant produce on a regular basis?
It can generally 20 to 40 million gallons a day is their typical production. They can produce more than that. In fact, they could produce water for all of Henrico. They've got enough capacity to do that.
Okay, so they have enough capacity, but we never produced that much because we were getting water from the city of Richmond.
Yes, sir, Mr.
Plants.
Rogish, and under contract is.
And okay, so tell us about that.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have had a contract with the city of Richmond for a long time. And as part of our arrangement with all of the regulatory agents and agencies involved and the city, we have got a contract now for till 2040. And we were relying on the city for pretty much the central and eastern portion of the county.
So when they produce water at their facility, it was being pumped mostly to the central and eastern side of Henrico County.
Mostly.
And that water, but it also a little bit it joins with ours. It's all interconnected, should we say?
Exactly correct. All those pipes are connected to the city's pipes and metered and valved from the city to us.
And so there's valves, there's 16, 15, 20 valves, something like that.
Yeah.
And those valves are controlled by computers or humans or both, or?
Both.
Oh, both. Okay.
The bigger valves are computer controlled. The smaller ones are human controlled.
Okay. So when you said earlier that our plant actually produces enough water, could produce enough water, is there an issue with getting our water to the east side?
Yes, and the system was never designed with the idea that we would flow water all the way east, because we had a contract with the city to supply us water. They had been doing so reliably for many, many years. Last time we had an outage was really Tropical Storm Isabel and Gaston. We lost power, as did the city. But we've had no problems for 21 years.
So in Henrico, even though we can produce enough, the way I explained this to my children, who, by the way, my children are in high school and middle school, they know everything. So they were telling me what was going on. But what I was explaining to them was simply, it was like a 12-lane highway coming from the western portion of the county, kind of funneling down to a 2-lane highway, and then it kind of goes back to a 12-lane highway through the central and eastern portion. And so we couldn't pump enough water through that 2-lane highway to the central part to get it to our residents on the eastern and central side.
That's a great analogy, sir.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell my kids that because they're going to think that.
Don't tell them that.
Okay, thank you. But does hopefully that kind of makes sense to everyone. Okay, so my last question is, when there was a boil water advisory, we know that central eastern side didn't have any water, but then there was a boil water advisory. Can you explain a little bit why that boil water advisory went out to the entire county versus just a portion of it?
Absolutely. And, as you noted, there are a number of smaller connections and there's some very big connections in the eastern part of the county. So for us to guarantee when the system got depressurized and then repressurized that some bacteria didn't get into those pipes when they were, bone dry and thus get transmitted into our system, we can't guarantee that 100% until we do bacteriological testing, which takes a couple of days. We have to do 2 rounds of samples and they have to be clean. So out of an abundance of caution, even though the likelihood of somebody in, it's particularly Western Henrico, where we had pressure, having a problem with the water, we still, out of an abundance of caution, have to recommend that you boil your water. So for those 2 days, we did. As soon as we could take those samples and test for bacteria, which is the main culprit we're worried about, we did so, and both those tests came back clean. And so Saturday, you were at the press conference.
We got it out to folks as soon as we knew how clean it was, and we got the test back, and we let people know. So really, when we talked about the reservoir earlier, we weren't in a situation where, even in Henrico County, that we were not able to produce enough water. We had plenty of water. We were producing enough water, good, clean water. We were just, the real struggle from Henrico was to get it across the way. And I'm sure that the report that is going to come back on February 11th is going to talk about sort of some long-term recommendations for both Henrico County and probably just Henrico, but not the region for this one.
Yeah, and actually short and long term, because, some of the things we asked about is what other system vulnerabilities can we address on a short-term basis? What can we do to make our system more robust and self-reliant on a long-term basis? So those are questions we wanted our hired engineers and our consultants that are looking at this to give us a menu and some estimated costs and timeframes to get these things put into place.
Excellent. Well, I don't have any questions for you. Are there any questions out there in the audience for Mr. Yab or myself on the water crisis from last week? Does that help explain it, first of all, a little bit? I'm seeing shaking heads. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say,
You're acting very strange back there, but
You're fine.
yes, 100. So just to repeat the question for those online, is there a better way we can get communication out a little bit sooner on that? Was the question. And I think that's all going to be part of the study that's being done in the next 30 days. Absolutely. We have a reverse 911 system that you can sign up for alerts. There's social media, et cetera. But I think that's part of the assessment that will come out, ma'am. Absolutely. Yeah. One more question. Yeah.
Great question. We cut all of our feeds from the city off very quickly because we didn't want to start back feeding our water into their system. We wanted to keep our water in Henrico and try and serve our customers. We then tried to shunt water to the east side and we just couldn't meet the demand. So that wasn't going to work. When the city came back online, and I think it was late Wednesday night, early Thursday, and started pumping to us, and we started putting water back in pipes, it didn't matter at that point. The pipes have been drained. And so the health department requires once you get below 20 pounds per square inch of pressure that you have a boil water advisory. So we were already at that threshold and we couldn't wait until the city cleared their boil water with their bacteriological tests, because then people in Verina and Fairfield didn't have water to flush toilets. So they're better off with a boil water and being able to flush than waiting 2 more days. So these are decisions that we had to make, and really we needed to get the water back on. So,
Well, yeah, I mean, right in the water fountain here, it's I would say 99.9% Henrico water, right? But because it is all interconnected, I think that was part of the issue before. We're not, can't guarantee exactly where a water pellet might end up. So, but yeah. Okay, folks, I have 3 more presenters tonight. I want to thank you, Mr. Yob, for bringing the water facility back online and being here tonight. Thank you. Next, I'm going to introduce Mark Coakley, who's in charge of our very important election process, our registrar. Thank you, Mark, for being here.
Great. Thank you very much, sir. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our presentation tonight. I want to start off by talking about the mission statement for the elections office. The registrar's office and the electoral board of Henrico strive to promote the highest level of service to the citizens of the Commonwealth by providing equitable opportunities to register to vote, by maintaining accurate records related to voter registrations, elections, and election officials and candidates. We are committed to promoting democracy and public trust in our endeavors in fair and impartial elections. And this is on our top page of our webpage. Right beneath it is mis and disinformation that happens in elections. Misinformation is when there's false rumors or misconceptions about elections, and disinformation can be targeted to measure spreading incorrect information, like voting is canceled on Tuesday because of snow, come out Wednesday. That is not true. We will hold an election on Tuesday if there is snow or water main breaks. So who's the boss for elections? You have the governor appoints the state board of elections and the election commissioner. The local registrar is appointed by the electoral board, who's appointed by the circuit court judges, who is nominated from the political parties. So on Boss's Day, I have 22 cards I have to mail out, right? For the board of supervisors, who does my budget for me, approves my budget, the county manager, the electoral board, the state board, the circuit court judges, everybody gets a card on Boss's Day. I'm just a very low person on the totem pole. But what we do, the main functions of the electoral board, is the voter registration and conducting elections. So to register to vote, you can either register online or at the DMV. You can register here at the library or social services, armed forces, and voter registration drives. What happens when you do register to vote is you get a voter notice once we get your information, and that information will include your name, date of birth, social security number, and residence address. You do not live in a P.O. box. You live in a house or apartment. So we need that residential address to know what districts you're in to vote. The electoral board will do logic and accuracy testing of all machines to make sure they are certified to vote. This picture is an example of testing the machines, running through a mock election, making sure everything is certified and ready to go. In fact, we have over 252,000 registered voters. This time last year, we had 249,000. So we've had a good increase this year of registered voters. People, citizens like you, your neighbors running the polling places, we had over 1,400 officers of election, and we have 90 neighborhood precincts to serve you. The map of precincts and polling places will break it down by magisterial districts, the 5 magisterial districts, the House of Delegate districts, state Senate districts, and all the other local, statewide, and countywide offices. So what we did is a couple of years ago, we had 125 ballot styles. That's an individual ballot for your person that will actually use all of these districts. Right now, because of absentee voting, with 90 precincts in the different counts of districts, we had over 225,000 ballot districts based on the size of the populations. Good thing about election administration in Virginia, the General Register of Elections is held the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. Primary elections are held on the third Tuesday in June, and that's because we want all schools to be out. We really don't want citizens going through the schools while the students are in session. So we moved it to the third Tuesday in June. Special elections be called at any time. In fact, did anybody know we had an election last Tuesday? We had an election last Tuesday. It was the 10th Senate District, 10th State Senate District. It was a small election part of Henrico County. But again, remember what was happening Tuesday. It was snowing and some people didn't have water, and yet we held the election and it went smoothly. So we are proud of the fact that we do tabletop exercises to make sure if any problems come up, that we hold fair and accountable elections. Staffing the precinct, I talked about all those number of election officials. Well, what do? You have a chief, you have an assistant chief, you have your ballot officer, and what my favorite person is the sticker patrol officer, right? They're the ones that are most popular after you vote. So a voter comes in, is greeted by the greeter saying, and the greeter I call is your used car salesman, right? They're hyper, they're ready to go. They want to see people saying, hey, do you have your ID? Do you know you're in the right district? And then they go get the check-in at the check-in table, get the ballot, vote the ballot, and get that I voted sticker. So much goes on in the process where we have, these are all the supplies that go to each precinct, right? The only thing you really see is your ballot and the sticker, right? So, but there are so many products that go into running an election on election day. Voter arrives, checks in, gets the ballot and votes. Another way to vote in Virginia is the absentee ballot. Virginia offers 45 days of absentee voting. We lead the nation in the number of early voting days across Virginia. You can vote either by mail or in person. And then what you can do is if you vote by mail, we have 5 drop boxes throughout the county, one here at Tuckahoe Library that's permanently set up. There are security cameras on those drop boxes 24/7. They are checked daily during election season. 2 people go out and will check to make sure there's any ballots in there and sign off on them. And we have them at the Varina libraries and the Eastern and Government Western centers also. Finally, I want to talk about voter history, the history of the ballots. First, we had verbal, right, where you just state your candidate's name. I want to vote for this person. Then we went to a paper ballot where you would write the candidate's name on a piece of paper, but it was just one paper per candidate. So now we use the Australian rule, right, where it's all candidates on the same ballot, and then you check a box. We had mechanical lever systems in the city. When I started here, I started with punch cards back in 2004 and earlier on, right? Remember 2000, the Bush v. Gore incident in Florida? Those were punch cards. And what happened was we went to the DRE electronic voting system because voters have a way to get rid of punch cards, I guess, and go to electronic voting. But we found out that electronic voting, as secure it was, you really need that paper ballot for recounts. And that's why we have the digital optical scan voting system now. Different ways to vote, maybe not in Virginia, but you can see how in other localities, they use just about any type of place they can find for a polling place. Electricity in 2011, we had an earthquake the other day, I think. It's a big boom. I had to run up to the attic to make sure it wasn't me, but 2011 election day, when the earthquake happened in Louisa County, we moved all the equipment outside and got to vote. September 11th in New York City was an election day. This is why it's real important to vote in local elections. You know, we vote for presidential elections and we have the highest turnout. And then the governor's election coming up this year is the second highest turnout. But I would like to see a day where the local elections that happen in 2023 or 2027 get the highest turnout. And you can see that from the World Trade Center, the voting precinct that was in there with the optical machines, the lever machines. So with that, I want to thank everybody for being out here tonight. I can take questions now. If anybody has any questions about voting or wants to see me afterwards. Yes, sir.
The question
So
was, how do you count the, okay, you can.
Yeah, how do we count the votes? That's a great question. So in Virginia, and I talked about the absentee voting being 45 days before an election. If you mail in a ballot and it's postmarked Tuesday election day, we can receive it until noon on Friday. As long as it has a postmark on that mail ballot, we can receive it till noon on Friday. So we're still counting ballots after the election. Your 90 neighborhood precincts all get reported election night. We print 4 tapes from the voting machines and we read those numbers and they're called into us. Everything is unofficial until that electoral board checks those tapes after the election. California, 2 to 3 weeks, right? And that's because, again, it's that postmarking of the ballot and making sure that every eligible voter gets counted. So provisional ballots and the mail ballots, you might hear of states that don't count them unless it's a close contest. If you vote in Virginia, your ballot's going to get counted, no matter if it's provisional, absentee, or election day. Yes, sir. Right. So there's 2 possibilities. What happens to the ballots if something happens to a candidate during those 45 days was the question. 2 things can happen. If a candidate withdraws within 45 days and say, nope, I changed my mind, but the ballot's been printed and tested and voted on, in your precinct, in your voting booth, it will say this candidate has withdrawn. You can still vote for them, and maybe the party will nominate another candidate. Something like that happens. But as long as those ballots are printed and that person wins, withdrawn or not, then they can choose not to take the office. And that's happened in some smaller localities like a mayoral's race or something like that, where candidates do. In June, I'll just tell you, in June, what we have is the party, right? You're picking candidates for the party nomination to be on the November ballot. So that's what is different about the June primaries. It's a nomination process to be on the November ballot. And in November, you're voting for that candidate. Again, thank you so much. It's been wonderful. And I'll be around afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Coakley. Really appreciate it. 2 more speakers for you tonight. We have with us tonight Miss Marcy Shea, who is the school board representative for the Tuckahoe district. Goodbye, sir. And she has also recently been elected the chair of the school board for Henrico County. So congratulations on that. I'll turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about what's going on in the schools.
Thank you, Mr. Rogish. So lots of great, exciting things happening in Henrico schools. Am I driving with this? Perfect. Thank you. So I just picked two to share with you this evening, which are two construction projects coming up that will impact our district that I'm very excited about. So the first one is a Tuckahoe Middle School auditorium. So if you live in the area, you may remember that back in, 2018, 2019, Tuckahoe Middle School was renovated. However, there was never an auditorium completed. That was part of the 2016 bond. And so we're going to go back and we are going to build an auditorium. And so this is an aerial view. And just to orient you, right here is 3 Chopped Road. And you can see all the buildings of Tuckahoe Middle School and then the project site that has been selected. This is kind of what the auditorium will look like that we're excited about. Tuckahoe has a really robust participation in the arts, drama, band, chorus, and strings. And so we're excited to give them a space that their students can really perform in that has better acoustics than what we call in the biz the gymnatorium, which is a gym with a stage attached. And you can imagine anytime they want to do anything, you also have to set up hundreds of chairs and that sort of thing. So we are excited about that. And then on the left, if you look, there's a little bit of a grade-in box, and that's where that auditorium will be going. So this is, you can see on the left, the existing site, and then on the right, sketched in the proposed auditorium. And so it is designed and shaped to fit that very specific puzzle piece size on where we could orient it on the campus. This is an idea of what the auditorium will look like. It'll have a lobby and a vestibule. It will have roughly 400 to 500 seats, which is comparable to other middle school auditoriums, kind of your typical middle school auditorium in Henrico. So if you compare it to, say, Pocahontas or Holman or those sorts of things, it should be comparable. These are just a couple different vantage points. So you can see on the left is the existing building where the office is, if you're familiar with Tuckahoe Middle. And then you see on the right would be the new auditorium. Another view from the parking lot as you're walking up. This is what the students will see when they're approaching the auditorium from campus, kind of inside campus. So here's the schedule. You may notice a problem with the schedule. That it is 2025 and there is new construction that has started. So the bidding process stretched on a little longer than we hoped. We went out to bid a couple times. I'll just be frank, school construction is very expensive right now. Construction in general, especially school construction, is very expensive right now. And so we've been back out to bid, trying to value engineer, trying to get closer to the targeted budget. Mildly successful there. But just on Tuesday night, the Board of Supervisors allocated funds so that we'll be able to move forward with the bid, which will come before the school board on Thursday. And so if you look at this timeline, I'd say we're roughly like a year behind. So if you just change those years at the end, it sounds pretty good. And so hopefully once we get this bid rolling, we'll be able to complete September 2026. Those funds, by the way, are coming from mostly meals tax funds. And so we leverage the meals tax here in Henrico for a lot of our maintenance projects at our schools and also smaller construction projects. Obviously, this is not small, but compared to the next one I'm going to show you, it's small. And so working together with the Board of Supervisors in there, looking at all the accounts, we'll be able to use meals tax money for this project. The next project I am so excited about. I've been advocating for this for probably my whole term, and that is the Quioccasin Middle School rebuild. If you have ever been in Quioccasin Middle School, formerly known as Byrd, you might notice that it is not an optimal design for a lot of reasons, but it's very hard to navigate the building with lots of sets of steps in the middle of hallways and no windows. And also in the last 50 years, the needs of instructional spaces have changed a lot. And so when we looked at what to do with Quioccasin, whether to renovate it or rebuild it, this was a very clear, let's rebuild it and bring in the wrecking ball. This is the current site. So to orient you, here, right here, we have Quioccasin Road. This is Pemberton Road. This is the DMV. This is Pemberton Elementary School. And this is the current Quioccasin. The new school is proposed and it's going to go on the back field. So if you're looking from Quioccasin Road, back where the softball and the baseball fields are, this will be completed much like we did Tucker. So we'll be building the school while school is still going on in this building. And then when it is completed, the existing school will be knocked down and a new baseball and softball field will be built. And so while there will be a little bit of a disruption to some of our athletics, we're able to partner with Recreation and Parks to relocate those. There won't be disruption to academic spaces during the construction project. So our design is not one, not two, but 3 stories of learning excitement. And so I'll show you a little bit what that looks like. So this is the first floor, and you'll notice a lot of the common spaces are here. You'll see the gym, the auditorium. They also don't currently have a separate auditorium. They have a gymnatorium. So this will also be very exciting for them, and some dining commons, along with a lot of the elective classes. This academic wing over here, the idea is to use that mainly for 6th grade classes. And then when we move up to the 2nd floor, you'll have the library. And then that academic wing will be used mostly for 7th grade classes. And then the language is on the right side. You'll also notice the back of the building doesn't have, a lot of those X's are going to be like 2-story spaces like the gym and the auditorium. And as we move further up in the building, more of the spaces are concentrated on the front of the building, and that is intentional. I'll show you in a minute. And then the 3rd floor on the left, you've got an academic wing that would be concentrated for 8th grade classes. And then on the right side, you have, they're labeled an innovation lab and innovation classrooms. The new Quioccasin will have a specialty center. So a center for innovation, which is partnered with the VCU Da Vinci Center, and some really neat hands-on learning opportunities for students. And so that's where those center classes that need some more specialized spaces, like the innovation lab, would be housed. This is what it would look like from the front. This is from the side. So kind of facing this side is going towards Pemberton Elementary School. That's the bus loop drop-off area. And so this is what I was talking about earlier. You'll notice the front of the building is taller than the back of the building. And that was done intentionally because there are neighborhoods, right? And there's residents right behind this. And so it was to minimize some of the impact on the, the view and that sort of thing from those backyards. So to have the 1 or 1.5 stories kind of in the back, and then the 3 stories in the front. This is the timeline we have going here. So the estimated budget for this one is $89 million. Like I said, the construction costs are going up, but this was budgeted for in the most recent bond referendum. This was the biggest schools project for our area is this building. And so this will be funded through the bond referendum. We are on track on this timeline. This summer 2027 would be when that new building opens and students are able to move into the new building. And then between these last 2 would be when that existing building is knocked down and the fields are completed to complete the site build. So it's really exciting. It is going to be an extraordinary building. It is going to be like a beacon of light for this area and really match the incredible instruction that is happening in that building. And we're looking forward to this building lasting 60, 70 years with all these spaces being able to be flexible for the kind of instruction that's happening. Principal Stevens at Quioccasin, who is extraordinary. He has been very involved in a lot of the design meetings and really nuancing the spaces and thinking, even down to, okay, what's the sight line down the hall for administrators and those sorts of things, and have involved his staff in those conversations. So the librarians are looking at the library, and the elective teachers are looking at the elective spaces, and they really have that eye for what might look the same between two options. For us, they say, no, I can do more with this space. So we're really excited about this design. It's been made specially for Quioccasin. It's super exciting. And so I want to give you one more nugget. Construction projects are fun and exciting, but if you want some more meat about what's going on in the schools, there's going to be a town hall on February 3rd. The school division hosts 2 town halls a year that look at the collective, our whole county. And the next one is being hosted in our district, which is great. And so all 5 board members will be there. Our superintendent, Dr. Cashwell, along with her cabinet, and really the subject matter experts. There'll be some breakout sessions at tables to discuss some of these topics. Right now, the proposed topics, to my understanding, are this upcoming budget, these Quioccasin construction plans I showed you, Henrico Cares, which is a partnership with our government side for mental health support. There has been an overwhelming, incredible response since it's been rolled out this year of utilizing and leveraging those resources. And just to share a little bit about that, and then some of the stuff that our family and community engagement team does. Last thing, community and family engagement. They're actually going to have a hub at the new Quioccasin. And so if you're familiar with the Oak, which was a repurposing of the old Highland Springs High School, they have a hub there that provides a lot of resources for that community. And our vision is to have a hub in all 5 magisterial districts. So Virginia Randolph would be a hub for the Fairfield district. And then over here on this side of town for the Tuckahoe district, our hub will be at the new Quioccasin Middle School, and really looking at what resources does the community need so that we can wrap around not only our students, but our whole community as we, all work together in Henrico. So that is schools. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I live from Quioccasin Middle School. And so I think it's beautiful, but I'm very concerned about you putting a ball field right across the street from my house. And, I go past, Freeman, and that ball field lights are on constantly. And I really don't understand why those aren't on timers, because it just seems like a waste of electricity. So I'm quite concerned with, I'm just picturing Freeman High School field across the street from my house. And so that's quite disturbing. I had a problem with Fire Station 9, and their lighting plan was completely lighting my yard like a soccer field. So I'm not sure why any of the neighbors around Freeman have not complained about that ball field lights being on constantly. So this is quite upsetting to see that you're going to put the ball field with those lights that seem to be left on all the time across from my.
I'm going to let our Parks and Rec tag in here as they help with our fields and usage.
So I can't speak to the plans, but a lot of middle schools do not have lit fields. So I don't know what the plans at Quioccasin are in terms of lit fields versus unlit fields. Most of our middle schools do not have lit fields. I can tell you, if they are going to be lit, the technology today is vastly different than even 5-10 years ago. All of the lights would be on timers. We typically use what's a Musco system that's on timers, so we can schedule from a phone, so we could schedule exactly when they're used. And then the foot candles, once you're 20-30 feet off of that field, there's no foot candles on those. So again, I'm not a part of the design there, but I can tell you most of them don't have them. And if they do, the technology is so that the ball field lights, once you're off the field, you wouldn't even have any foot candles from those lights. Well, so high school athletics have a lot. So middle school athletics are all right after school. And actually, I don't think past like 6:30, they even have any scheduled activities, where high school has activities. Friday night football games are 7:30, 7 o'clock that go later. Now, I will say on the high school front, we don't have, and I'm not responsible for all the high schools, but there is a plan to replace, and I know with our ball field lights, we do go back in and replace older lighting systems, but it is a capital improvement. And particularly when you're talking schools, a lot of the capital dollars gets put towards the instructional and maybe not some extracurricular. But there are plans to go in to replace older aging systems so that they're more energy efficient, and then also they don't have as much spill in the lights. We can control them more. And some of those older systems, you don't have the same type of controls and efficiency that the newer systems have.
We're going to get back to you. I mean, make sure we have exactly your name. So I want to first make sure we are putting lights at Quioccasin Middle School first. They don't have lights today on their baseball field in the back. I know that for sure. I'm almost certain. Yeah. In the baseball field?
They do. So the older, it's kind of interesting. The older designs of some actually elementary and middle schools had lights. The newer designs are unlit, and that's mostly because those fields were used for things like adult softball and other youth organizations. But I believe like Short Pump Middle School, I think even what's some of the newer ones, Pocahontas, I believe most of those are unlit fields. So again, that's something that we can work on the design.
Okay. Anything else on schools? Yes, sir. Oh. Yeah, maybe at the end. So we have one more speaker. I try to get you out of here by 7 if we can. Mr. Zanino, so on some updates on two of our parks. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Rogish. So back in the fall, I came and spoke at Mr. Rogish's meetings about our master plan. So talked about that then. I'm happy to share that our master plan, after about a 2-year process, was adopted back in September. And the reason I wanted to start with that is because our master plan is really the guiding document and roadmap for the development of our park system. It really looked at what are the needs of our park system, what are the needs, what do you as the residents want to see, and do we have any levels of service deficiencies, and specifically in the Tuckahoe district, didn't come back as a surprise to us, is we do have a lack of parks in the Tuckahoe district. And we were aware of that. And that really is because the Tuckahoe district, unlike some of the other districts, was developed before our agency was really a part of the county. So a lot of the neighborhoods were already developed before we had the opportunity to get some parkland and develop some parks. And so that kind of created a challenge. So when we look at what we do in the Tuckahoe district, we have to kind of get creative and take some different approaches, because there is an abundance of land or things that are undeveloped. But that doesn't mean that we can't do some things. And I'm going to share some really unique projects and ways that we can address that. So this is a map that you'll see, and just highlighting, particularly when you overlay population densities versus where we have parks. But one of the areas that we're going to talk about is, if you look in the far west end, you see an area that we've identified between the Circle 70 and 79 where we need a park, particularly because we have a vulnerable population in that area, and there's not really park facilities. And the way we're going to address that is through Tuckahoe Park. So you may know this as Tuckahoe Little League. This is the property that has served the Little League from very early on. I'm going to date myself. I played there in the early 90s. That park needs some love, but that park has been for the Little League, and it will continue to be for the Little League. But with the 2016 bond project, we allocated funding to upgrade this facility, and we're going to really do two things with this. One, we want to address all of the needs of the Little League. So we want to bring all of the fields up to our current standards, regrading the fields, improving drainage, improving spectator seating areas. So think, if you're familiar with RF&P Park, you go into that park and you see there's shade structures for the players, or shade for the spectators. So that's the type of amenities that you're going to see in all of these fields. We're going to add a new restroom right in the heart of the complex where most of the fields are at. But we're also going to fix some of the other infrastructure, some of the landscaping. We're going to put in a path. So there's going to be a shared use path, or a sidewalk that goes through the whole property, that makes it ADA accessible, because currently there's many areas that are not accessible. So this will interconnect all the fields. It will be able to get across the main road over to the concession stand area, and then it will go connecting all of that. So someone with mobility issues is really able to traverse the entire site. But the other thing that we're going to be able to do here is add in some neighborhood amenities and really build a community park area that has some things that not only can parents take their kids while their siblings are playing Little League, but the neighborhood can use, and they can walk in and use it. So you're going to see up in that left-hand corner, we can put in playgrounds, shelter. We're going to put a restroom in up there, connect that trail network, because the biggest thing that came back from our master plan is people want places to get out in nature and walk. And we're able to do that in an undeveloped area of the park, so that we can really meet both of those needs. And then we're hitting that vulnerable population can use this park. And then also the Little League gets those upgrades that facility really needs. Timeline on that. So you're going to start seeing work rather quickly. Actually, before the Little League season gets started, we're going to be doing some improvements, like adding batting cages. And then we're going to be doing some tree clearing. So I don't know if I've talked to this group before about some of the regulations, but there is a federal regulation that you can't clear trees between April 1st and November 15th. So there's a endangered bat, and I won't get into all the details, but we have to, if we want to get construction going, we have to clear some of those trees. So you're going to see some of that work taking place in maybe late February, early March. And then later, like March, April, we'll bid this job so that we are able to start our construction when the Little League season comes to an end somewhere in that May to June timeframe. And then the majority of the construction will take place in over the next two kind of off seasons of the Little League. So this summer going into fall, and then we'll complete it the following summer. The next project I want to talk about is Tuckahoe Creek Park. So we've had a number of meetings. I believe it's almost been 2 years. I think it was 18 months from our last meeting or first meeting where we kicked off that master plan. We've had a lot of feedback. And the biggest takeaway from that was we had a lot of people with some concerns, and we wanted to take the time to hear those concerns. A lot of the feedback was we were moving too quickly, and we wanted to be very deliberate about hearing everyone's concerns, taking in that feedback. And we've been doing that, and that's why that has taken so long. And what you're going to hear next is hopefully early spring, hopefully the next month or so, we'll be able to come back to you guys. But our plan is to focus our development on the southern section because that is a section that we can address all of the concerns where we aren't able to address some of those concerns on the other areas. So if you're not familiar, Tuckahoe Creek is the farthest western point of Henrico. We actually have property that goes intermittently all the way from Broad Street all the way down to Patterson. We don't have all of that property because we do have some residents that have their property goes all the way up to Goochland. So we're going to focus on the southern section where we can address issues like a proper park access, where you could have parking and a trailhead amenity. So we're actively trying to acquire some property, and then we'll come back to you when we are able to announce some of the things that we've been working on to show you the plan that we have, because we still have to come back to you, the residents, with another meeting to show what we can do, because we have to get a master plan approved. So we will do that. We'll have a community meeting where you can share feedback and look at what we're doing. We can take in more ideas. And then if we can address all of those concerns, we'll then turn that over to the Planning Commission for approval, and then ultimately the Board of Supervisors for approval of the master plan. And then that will kind of give us the green light to go into a design and construction. But this is a fully funded project, so we're not waiting on funding. We just need to get through all of the community meetings and then the design and construction of that. This project was funded from our 2016 and our 2022 referendums. There were $5 million in both those last two referendums to fund this project. So with that, I'll answer any questions on any of this or anything else in recreation. Yeah. Which neighborhood specifically? So the only existing infrastructure we have is off of Ridgefield and Old Coach. What we have been proposing, and what you'll see in our last master plan meeting, was a rendering, well, not a rendering, but a potential path, and it would be a boardwalk. And that's what we were showing, and trying to get that boardwalk towards the center of our property where the main area of the creek is. You can go to our website. We're still taking in feedback. So you can go and look at what we've already shared and see what the alignment looks like, see what those impacts would be, and provide feedback. But that's what we have shared to date, has just been proposed alignments, and that it would most likely be a boardwalk akin to what is at the current Ridgefield and Coach area. But we don't have anything other than that little section developed.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. And
Yeah. So again, both, and just for the people online, both comments are primarily around parking on that park. And I think we've had that conversation a number of times. We're not building anything else unless we can build a parking lot attached to it, because parking next to residents and all that is not an option. So we think we have a good solution, and we're going to present that in a little bit. But like he said,
yeah, and that's why at this time we're not proposing anything there, because we can't address that issue. Where we do believe we have some solutions on the southern section where we can address that issue. So that's really the intentionality of why we're focusing in that area.
we do have a question online that I'm going to read, and I'm going to bring the planning commissioner, Mr. Winterhoff, up. Is there anything else for our recreation and parks director, Mr. John Zanino?
So that was actually that was the CDC index, and what they're doing is taking 16 data points from the census data and combining it into one set. So it's looking at economic levels, it's looking at ethnicity, it's looking at a number of different factors to determine what a community's vulnerability is. So it's those 16 sets into one. So that's really all it is doing, is looking at those factors.
Okay, the question online, and Mr. Winterhoff, maybe you can come up and help answer this question, but as with all the housing development going on at Reynolds Crossing, Genworth, Willow Lawn, and the hotels next to Home Depot on Broad, bringing new residents, kids, and cars to the area, what planning has been done in terms of traffic and school redistricting? Because we did go over all of this in the Reynolds case. And so, Mr. Winterhoff, you want to take that question?
Be happy to. And good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Winterhoff. It's great to be able to share, I think, my experience over the past year of joining the Planning Commission and helping address, I think, a lot of these questions. I can talk specifically to the Reynolds Crossing application because I was involved with that. And all the things that were listed here, and I can add more onto that too, but the planning department, to ensure the quality of development that's going on and the impact that it's having, is all thought of as part of this application process. So things from like traffic impact. We have wonderful people and partners who are able to build models and be able to estimate out what type of change this will result in. This is also applied to our schools. We want to make sure that we're being thoughtful. We want to make sure that we are looking ahead and not seeing these dramatic impacts that we did not anticipate. I have told so many people, my friends, my family, and anyone else who will listen to me, the team that is working within the planning department is world class. The investment, the type of questions and research that they're doing to help us address this at the time of application. So I do invite everyone to come to our planning commission meetings. They are every month, and that is where we publicly will review these applications. So I know specifically with this one, yes, we did a traffic impact analysis study. It's great to share as part of this project over the next few years. We will be installing a new bus stop. That line that extends there, where for the first time we're going to be able to connect that to Forest Ave. But to the schooling too, we wanted to be very thoughtful on the type of construction that'll be going here. We'll introduce some new families, but these are primarily 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. And we have seen in other developments over the past many years what that impact will be. And so these are things that we will always consider at time of application.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Winterhoff. Appreciate it. Before we wrap up, are there any other questions online or in the audience? Yes, ma'am. That's correct. And I think the one thing, if you can get signed up for the word on the street, that was the link. And what we'll do is, I know we have your email. Well, I'll send an email, I'll follow up email to everybody with that, but how to sign up for that, because that really does go to our public works guys. And what will happen is anything that's in the planning for sidewalks, et cetera, will come out in that word on the street document. If there is a place in which you particularly are looking for, please email me, tuckahoe@henrico.us. That's the best thing to do, especially, yourself, your neighbors, et cetera. That's the best way to get, the sidewalk up the list, et cetera. So, but do please email me, because ultimately, yes, we have so much money in the county that we can utilize. Obviously, it's split by district. And then within the district, we have to decide. I mean, sidewalks, I don't know if there's anybody here who can tell me, but they're like everything else, ridiculously expensive anymore. It's like $1 million for a half mile or something. It's crazy how much sidewalks are these days. So, but anyways, send me an email, request where you're looking for, depending, and what we've learned, obviously, it's easier to do it on roads that we control in Henrico County. There are some roads like Patterson Avenue that are still state-run roads. And so we run into a little more of a challenge on Broad Street and Patterson Avenue because they're state roads and what we can do on those state roads. But if they're county roads, we have a lot more flexibility. Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Planning department is, your planning department is world class. That's great to hear. I'm really looking forward to seeing some changes with that planning department, because what people are seeing is just going in and clear cutting and then just putting in a tree and a tree and a tree. You know what I mean? And so that seems disturbing when we need trees in our world. So I bet you the Little League Park is probably going to be, all those trees are going to be wiped out, and then they'll just put in a tree here and there as they need. So it seems to me that you don't see a lot of building around a nature setting in Henrico County. It's just clear cut and then come in and then put your plants back. So I'm curious about that. And then also, if you're familiar with the Dark Sky Association, that's the way, that's world class right there for planning.
Good.
I thank you for that question, because that is something I'm passionate about too. And again, just reflecting on the Reynolds project, part of the agreement with that is to leave those beautiful trees that are there. I am passionate about native plantings. We want to continue to plant things that are intended to be here. The lighting plans too, and the applications that I've been included on, there are dark sky standards. So these are things, again, personally for me, I'm learning much more about, but these are things that are important. And to hear these questions, please keep them coming. Please continue participating, because we want to continue building these great places that are thoughtful of our environment.
Thank you. We just don't need any more overlighting of Henrico County, and that's the problem.
And I'll add on the park front. So if you have, we mentioned Taylor Farm at the very beginning of this. Taylor Farm is really the model for what we're doing moving forward. That is a 99-acre site. We only developed 18 of it, and we developed our site around the trees. So we actually have play equipment with large oak trees in the middle of the playground, in the middle of the play equipment. So I would encourage you to go there, because you can see that we didn't just take 100 acres and do that. And when you look at what we're proposing out at Tuckahoe, so that north east, or that upper left corner, that's about 15 acres. We're only going to touch maybe half an acre of trees, and we're going to try to keep as much of that. And again, that same model of that we used at Taylor Farm. Can we use the tree canopy as our shade? Can we use that as, the kids love to play with the branches. So, you could see that whole area just wiped, and we're trying to be intentional to not do that and try to use that.
Yes, sir. Are you trying? Well, I did tell people an hour, so but maybe grab me afterwards, unless you. Okay. I just want to thank everybody. I thank everybody online. Thank you for coming out tonight. We're going to get another one scheduled here in the next probably month or two at the most. And please, if you can get out to the February 3rd to the schools, go to that. Otherwise, have a wonderful, safe new year. Okay, thank you all.